What so many people forget is that we are a nation born of an act of criminality, an act of treason. Now, a lot of people have heard charges such as that I myself am a traitor, that I have committed treason. In fact, I have committed no treason. I have not been charged with committing treason, because treason is one of the few laws which is actually specifically written into our Constitution. It has a very particular definition, which is not at all in line with my political activities. But when we talk about treason, when we talk about traitors, when we talk about what it means to have a citizen say something that is so offensive, whether it is the revelation of a secret or a declaration of independence, that they are cast out beyond the law, they are persecuted, killed if captured, exiled, or other things, we need to think about why. Now, in my case, for those who are not familiar with my personal background, I do feel an obligation to talk briefly about why it is that we're here tonight, why we're having this conversation. We're going to be talking about surveillance in our lives. This means we're going to be talking about power. Why? Because people are only interested in data, communications, surveillance, watching people for the utility that it provides. They don't do it for its own sake. Outside academia, there are not very many people who are looking at information for information's sake. Whether we're talking about Facebook, determining what ads you see, or something rather more concrete, information today is a convenient means. It's a mechanism for attaining a certain power. And that power today is control. Now, typically, in a democracy, our post-1776 democracy, control over the general outline of society is intended to be exercised by the people, with their will imposed upon powerful institutions, be they police, with their powers of detention, arrest, imprisonment, or even killing, or the military and spy agencies, or back into those powerful private entities, even corporations. But unfortunately, in that paradigm today, we have happened upon a problem. Surveillance technologies have outpaced democratic controls. A generation ago, surveillance was extremely expensive. There was a natural limitation imposed upon it. That is, the governments had to spend huge, extraordinary sums to track lone, isolated individuals. To know a particular person's location might involve many teams of officers, both in buildings and out on the streets, working in shifts. But today that dynamic is reversed. One guy sitting in front of a monitor can track with precision an unimaginably large number of people. For the first time in human history, it's both technologically and financially feasible for governments to track and store nearly complete records of our private lives. Now, this is not science fiction. This is happening now. When we look at the construction of facilities such as this, the NSA's data center in Bluffdale, this was called by them the MDR, the Massive Data Repository. They called it that for a reason. This was not the targeted data repository. This was not something that was designed just to watch this person or that person. It's because they were ingesting everything, everywhere, and saving it in case it might be of interest later, in case something came up. Someone who previously there was no justification to watch, someone who had committed no crime, someone who was an ordinary person would have their life captured, crystallized, compressed, and stored perfectly, timelessly for 5 years or more, just in case they wanted to look at them. Now, the NSA, to their credit, interestingly, they thought this branding was a little bit problematic, and this was before I came forward. They thought, massive data repository, that doesn't really sound very good. Why don't we call it the mission data repository, the mission data center? And they did, they changed the name, that's what it is today. But this is representative of a much larger progression that should be alarming us, because many people think that I have some grievance against the National Security Agency particularly. Others, who know even less about my history, think I may be anti-American or against our government. I want to end all surveillance. I don't. I signed up for the US military, for the Army in 2004 when everyone else was protesting against it. I volunteered to work overseas undercover for the CIA. Then I worked for the NSA overseas. I came back and worked as a Dell contractor for the CIA, and then I went to Hawaii again as an NSA contractor. I was drinking the Kool-Aid for a very long time, right? And this is not to say these people are doing bad things. There is no evil grand conspiracy amongst average NSA employees to burn down your rights, to destroy the fabric of our society. That's not what they're there for. But it's important to remember that good people can very easily do bad things for what they believe are good reasons. And this is what's happening today. Even in developed democracies, places that should know better, in the past few months, the United Kingdom passed the most extreme surveillance bill in the history of Western democracy, called the Investigatory Powers Bill. It takes everything the NSA was doing, institutionalizes it, and expands it to a level of intrusive detail that truly is beyond what we have seen the worst police states in history have within their authorities to go after. This is a law so authoritarian and so abusive that experts say it goes farther than laws like China and Russia, which I think we can all agree are no friend to civil liberties. Now, these problems don't only exist far away in other countries, and this is the central issue that we face in our modern times. In the lesson of these last few years, I would say, in democracy, in the United States, in our government, is that our government, like all governments, does not ask for permission before it acts. It deployed these capabilities, which the federal courts in the United States have said not only were unlawful for the entire history of their operation, more than a decade, not only that they had violated the rights of every man, woman, and child in the United States, but that they were likely unconstitutional, this is a direct quote, and Orwellian in scope. But they deployed these capabilities in secret, even when they knew in advance these programs were unlawful or unconstitutional, at least likely so, perhaps even because they knew this. And this effort succeeded for one particular reason. It was enabled because of failures in our intended mechanisms for congressional oversight. Courts that were unwilling to permit legal challenges. This would be in February of 2013, 4 months before I came forward. The Supreme Court had a case before it about precisely the mass surveillance that months later I would have agreed. Had the court ruled otherwise, my actions would not have been necessary. No one would have ever heard my name. But the Supreme Court said that although this case raises serious constitutional implications, although this could be a violation of Americans' rights, the government said it was classified. The White House, the administration, the executive, said the plaintiffs, this would be Amnesty International represented by the American Civil Liberties Union, could not prove that they were being spied on. And if you can't prove that it's happening, the courts said we have no role in the controversy. No matter how likely it is, no matter how problematic it would be if it were true, we have to blind ourselves to likelihood and instead confine ourselves to fact. And the government abused that. Now, perhaps this was okay. Because we have a tripartite system of checks and balances in the United States, of course. We have the legislature, we have the judiciary, we have the executive. What of the legislature? We had a Congress